Hey, welcome back. Happy Thursday.
Welcome in, Therapy Flow.
I know most of the practice owners listening to this want to increase revenue this year in some category or another. That's the typical state of most businesses, especially as we do the turn of the year and year planning. I've heard some, they say, hey, I want to increase revenue by 25%, or I want to literally double my practice, or I want to do more than double my practice. So I think it's a really important time to not just throw spaghetti at the wall and say, "Yeah, let's go for it." But this morning we wanted to zero in on 5 very specific, very doable ways to get big increase of revenue and measurement. And some of these, if you fix it or you do it alone, can 2x you right then and there. So let's dive in. This is going to be relevant for solo and group practice owners. And as we make it deeper down the list, it will get a little bit more nuanced, but it will have a chance for you to hear some things that maybe you haven't heard in the past that will grow your practice revenue, to really uncover some stuff that maybe you're not thinking about for more advanced marketing and revenue generation strategies.
I want to encourage you guys too. Josh and I did a big annual planning for Therapy Flow uh, just
Shh,
a little bit
don't
ago.
tell them we plan. Don't reveal all
Yeah.
of our secrets. No.
So we just finished that. And I think coming out of that, there was one really interesting conversation. And I think if you're looking at like a big goal, like a big, what is it, big, hairy, audacious goal or whatever, to double your practice, come up with a timeline and figure out how to shorten that timeline. But then you really only have to do one of these to actually double your practice. And so I think sometimes we get in the weeds of trying to do all of them. So we're about
Yeah.
to go through a list of 5. You don't have to do all of them. You just have to do one of them really well in the timeline that you like. And so figure that out and kind of work backwards. I'll go ahead and get us started. But number 1 is going to be doubling your referral volume.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of cheeky.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a little trite, like har har. Yeah, if I like increase the amount of people who contact me, of course my business will grow. But we have to start here because it's the most obvious lever to increase your practice. Now, there's one big caveat. If you're getting 2 people reaching out to you a month, simply going to 4 will probably double your business, but it might not be that measurable. But for the group practice out there who's saying, yeah, I get consistently 40 inquiries a month, if we get that to 80, which is totally doable, that will probably double your top line business. And if we, and typically, right, more leads will come in. If even if we just close the same amount and we convert the same amount of those over to our therapist, we'll double the practice volume. And that's the biggest lever we see with most of our practices, that when we have a conversation with them, we're like, hey, the growth is probably going to take care of itself. You're already a good recruiter. You're already a good staff trainer. You're already doing all these other things really well. So if you want to be on a growth curve for your practice, we just should double the amount of inquiries coming in, and you'll probably successfully take care of everything else along the way
Yeah,
to a point.
I think back one thing when I was a younger business owner, I had a mentor, and essentially the conversation went, "Hey, you're doing the things for the business. Now it's just time to spend more on ads." And I was like, "What? Like you just double your spend on ads, and you just double how many people you're talking to, and then you double the amount of closes you have, and then you double the amount that you're fulfilling." So it's like it can be very linear. Sometimes it's not as clean cut as that. However, it's pretty linear.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to do more.
And sometimes it's not double the effort to get double the output. So, what I mean by that is for ads, sometimes the more you spend, your lead cost drops lower. So, for some of you, you're like, oh man, I only want to spend $5 a day on my ads, and you get $10 leads. Well, if you spent $10 a day on ads, you might actually get $5 leads, and you'll get 3x because it's almost deflationary in that way. Similarly, the longer you invest in SEO, if you increase the volume of how much traffic, that also gets deflationary because more and more people will visit your site month over month. So if you increase your effort by a little bit, it will have a profound effect. Be like, man, if I just did one more blog a month, 12 months from now, that might double my traffic, but I'm not doing twice as many blogs a month. So there's some ways that if you just input a little extra, it will actually produce twice as many leads from that category.
Yeah.
Any other
I
suggestions, Attilio, on ways to really focus or increase lead volume this next year that a practice owner might not already be thinking about?
increasing lead volume. Sometimes I think a lot of y'all who do networking just aren't networking with the right people. Or
Mm,
you're focused on like networking one to one, or on your channels that you think you have um, no say on if you get referrals or not. You actually do have a little bit of say. I think of like the Psychology Todays out there. So many of you are using platforms or doing marketing and you're trying to set and forget it. This is my call for you to take an active approach to those channels. So, social media, some of you pay a virtual assistant a few $100s a month to just run your social media on autopilot. What would it look like to take a more active approach? If you could double your practice, would it be worth taking an active approach on some of these angles?
yeah.
And I'd like to encourage you to maybe look at how can you take an active approach to your referral volume, because sometimes it's just taking an active approach, figuring something out, and then deploying that new strategy.
Yeah. And I'll just share one quick example personally. For the first several years of Therapy Flow, we very purposely did not have a website because we did not want to be investing in a website and in paid ads and word of mouth referrals as our acquisition strategies at the same time. We wanted to do one thing well. But it did come a point where like we want to grow the business beyond what it is now. And we could, yes, double ad spend, but there does come a point where like, hey, let's diversify to multiple acquisition strategies. And we're like, well, how do we double our leads? Well, if we got a website up and running, what's the resource and the play? At the end of 2023, more than 50% of our leads were coming from our website by the end of that year. And that was the goal, to say, let's double our leads, but let's double it through a second channel. So we get just as much from paid ads, and now we get just as much, and we've doubled our practice. So sometimes it looks like doubling down on a single channel, like Attilio said, taking an active role and doubling it through your ads, doubling the ad budget. Sometimes it looks like going all in on a new channel and doubling lead volume through the new thing that you aren't currently doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one. For us, it doesn't just go to how many leads you generate, but we also see a huge difference for practices that spend a lot of time increasing the percentage of inquiries, referrals, leads that they are able to close. You personally or your team have a closing percentage in your office. Typically, we see that anywhere from 10 to really high, upwards of 80%. I genuinely hear all the time, I have a great closing ratio. Like I convert almost every client that I talk to. That is typically not true. Is it's I'll use probably a bad example, but it's like the dentist who's like, "Oh yeah, do you floss?" And some people genuinely are great flossers. They're consistent, they do it, they're on top of it. But it's a trope for a reason because most people are like, "Yeah, I mean, I guess I floss." And most people don't actually floss consistently. It's kind of how the closing percentage is. When we slow down, we actually track exactly how many calls, how many people talk to, how many follow-ups were there. The closing percentage is usually a lot lower than we feel like it is.
Yeah. This is one of those that if you don't have great automatic data in place that is not influenced by people, um, I think this is where you start getting into like the real numbers, right? Um, And it's not that we don't trust our staff, it's not that we don't trust ourselves. It's just there's a lot of people that reach out. There's a lot of things that happen inside of our sales process that we just don't know,
Yeah.
or we are just willingly letting go. I think of like, yeah, I've been emailed by one off random people asking me questions, and then I just answer their questions and then I never hear back from them. It's like, well, that was a sales opportunity. Like, that was an opportunity for you to go in and see if you need to triage this individual or make a great impression on them. Maybe they make a referral later. Like, all these opportunities are great opportunities to create relationships. And so we need to take a very active approach to getting the data, knowing the data, understanding the process, that like triaging process in your practice, and then what are you actually doing over time to keep either interacting or otherwise to move someone from maybe they had cold feet or never made a decision, they were tire kickers, to someone who actually ends up working with the practice or ends up referring you out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in here, and I think if it's all human in your practice right now, I think that there's some space to grow there. But then I also
Definitely.
think that there's elements where once you have information about your data, you can make strategic decisions on what are the things that you actually need to fix. Like maybe you have a great closing percentage. Maybe when you have someone on the phone, you end up working with them, which is great. Maybe that means you have all the right therapists and you say the right things and you know how to help them buy mental health services. But maybe it turns out that you're getting like a ton of new inquiries, a ton of potential clients that are tire kickers that maybe you haven't been able to get on the phone in a successful way or in a healthy way. And so these are all elements that can affect your closing percentage.
Yeah. And if we are able to take a 30% close ratio and take it to a 60% close ratio, that will double the amount of clients you get without having to increase your lead volume even. And if we do a mix of both increased leads and increased close percentage, like, whoa, we're really making progress on additional revenue growth. Two or three quick notes. If you're a cash pay practice, we typically see anywhere from, depending on what you're happy with, a 10% close ratio to upwards of a 60% close ratio if things are going really well. Some practices do have higher than that, but cash pay practices typically have a lower conversion rate. If you land between 30 and 60%, that's probably pretty good. Obviously, we can only ever have a 100% close ratio. So there is diminishing returns at some point here, but there's big gains to make if you're in that 10 to 40% pile. And if you're an insurance-based practice, you definitely can see somewhere between probably 60 to a more than 80% close ratio if this is done correctly and your marketing's dialed in, conversations are dialed in. So if you're outside of those parameters, that tells you, oh, maybe this is a section of the business that we can work on. Or if you haven't tracked it and you don't know the numbers, that would be the best starting point. Moving kind of on, other than increasing closing percentage, increasing the amount of people who make it to session two. I do talk to some practices where they're like, yeah, 40 to 50% of my clients after they have session one don't come back to session two. This is typically true for larger group practices that we talk to versus the solo practice where there's a lot of rapport built in the intake session and first session. But at volume, this is a really big problem because if, yeah, they become a client, but if they don't stick around for session two, we're having to replace that person and refill our therapist calendar at a way faster rate than we should.
Yeah. When I see session two, I hear buy in, like the client's buy in. And buy in gets developed during the intake process, buy in gets developed during the first session with a therapist. And while there's like ethical things that you can't like tie a client in exactly, and you don't always know when someone's going to finish their help, for the most part, I think we can all agree that one session isn't enough to help anybody really with much. You're really just getting to know the person, and maybe giving them some initial suggestions. And so session two is usually a function of something organizationally wrong.
Yeah.
This could be your scripts, this could be who they matched with, this could be a number of factors. But getting someone to show up for that second session is the equivalent of getting someone who's a little bit more bought in. This is actually developing that real client, right? Someone who shows up for one session is not really a real client yet because they haven't even given you a fair shake of the stick. They haven't given themselves a fair shake. And so this is like developing that person into the full true client that they actually need to be.
Yeah. So this is going to be a little bit harder to track, specifically because every therapist on your team is going to have a different rate of success here. But it's important to track against your therapist. And it's even more important the more therapists you have on your team to track this. And you need a process in place to train, to fix on an intake level, on a systems connection level, and then in the first session level. So that way, when you see a therapist on your team not having good session 1 to session 2 connection outcomes, we can put a plan in place to train them and to help them get that number up because it impacts your business so much.
This rate is something that you should probably look at after you have a few clinicians, right?
Yeah.
This is something after you have like 6, maybe 10 clinicians, you're starting to put data in place. The way that we would suggest that you do this, we have tracking sheets that we have that we encourage everybody to use, but essentially what you do is set up tracking sheets that your therapists and your administrators are part of the sort of data gathering process here. And as they're collecting that data, as they're sort of working and managing their client load amongst each other, you'll actually be able to pull this type of data out. So that way you can actually train in and build your program up to something that's going to be really effective and efficient. I think we lost Josh here. I'll give him just a second to see if he pops back in. Otherwise, number 4 is going to be increase how much current clients spend with you. So this is an interesting bullet point that not too many practices touch on. Did it end the live? Nope. So, hey, we're back. All right. So I just jumped over to point number 4, which was increase how much current clients spend with you. This is a really interesting point because you don't talk about it too much. Although it does kind of seem like it's like a shiny object, I think sometimes for a lot of our counselors, and that's going to be have like secondary services or secondary elements that use your current sunk costs, and find ways to make those costs more profitable. And so this looks like possibly putting out resources. So that's like your time that you've spent it maybe once and you just get it to work. Resources, group sessions. So this is like your therapist that you've already paid for the hour. They're administering the group session. You can sell more seats to the group session that end up being more dollars in the bank than just a normal session. Intensives, which is like fast cash all up front. And then, of course, like books or workshops or otherwise. There's lots of ways to use your current sunk costs. And this is kind of this is a double-edged sword because you can really go down this path and find something that works, and you can get something really awesome and profitable out of the box, and something incredible could work for your practice. Or you could spend a lot of time working on something that it could have just been better if you just figured out how to run your current business a little bit bigger. And so there's kind of 2 angles that I look at this, and it's like, do I need to double down on my current practice, or do I need to figure out something new, something more profitable possibly? And there's a lot of therapists out there who manage to make it successful, especially like resources, books, and workshops. We've seen a lot of intensives come through, especially for solos. Dropping in intensives can be a massive source of cash and cash injections, versus like trying to have a whole group roll out intensives. So this is just like some interesting elements here. Josh, what else do you have here?
I was just going to say, Ask yourself, if you know how much effort it takes to hire and fill out one clinician, that's worth about $100,000 to your practice annually. So then when you are spending the time to launch something else, ask, how much effort is this going to take? How much potential money can this bring into the practice? And is it easier at this juncture with my size and other infrastructure to just go and hire one more therapist and fill them out? Or launch this secondary thing to be helpful? Do I need to open up a second product line to get momentum from other places that have already built infrastructure, as Attilio said? Or do I need to add one more $100,000 clinician to my team? Is maybe a quick way to help you decide through this. And then as we wrap up, there's one last one that therapists don't talk about much because I don't think they like to talk about it, and that's retaining clients longer. There is a happy balance between great clinical outcomes and graduating clients successfully and therefore retaining clients for the appropriate amount of time and then losing clients because something else is going on. Here's what we are for: graduating clients when it is clinically appropriate to reduce their sessions to graduate them up and out. What we're not a fan of is losing clients earlier than you should have because of poor communication, bad clinical training or clinical outcomes, and a host of other things. And that is something that requires you to be investing in your clinical team and how to engage clients and how to improve your product. The better your product and the better results that clients get, the longer you will retain your cohort of clients per your clinician's caseload successfully to the end of clinical outcomes, because they'll eventually always leave you if you're doing your job correctly, and they'll also leave you if you're doing your job incorrectly. And we want to just cover our downside on that last one.
Yeah, I think this is another point where having better tracking and data, having a better management system for your practice is really, really helpful because in a lot of cases, maybe you have several therapists or tens of therapists where they're doing like sessions day in and day out, and sometimes their clients book again, sometimes their clients don't book again immediately, sometimes their clients have to like wait or think about things. Having a record of those elements is immensely helpful because it tells you who you maybe need to follow back up with. There's practices who are losing or just not following up with in time or in a timely manner, or not being aware of who they need to follow up with in what timelines in order to rebook clients that they've already spent time and energy acquiring and intaking, and maybe
Yeah.
even spent time and energy on in sessions. And so this is a category where I think a lot of practices really need to level up at. And I think they're hesitant because you don't want to be like chasing down people. But if you have a great record and you understand how you're segmenting out the individuals, I think there's a really healthy ethical balance on how to re-engage and just really check in on clients
Yeah.
after you haven't heard from them in a while, and do it at scale.
Yeah. Two quick suggestions here. Number one, go counselor by counselor on your team and look at how many new clients did I place with them in the entire year of 2023, and what is reasonable of a graduation rate or churn rate if clinical outcomes are being successful. Oh man, why did this counselor get placed with over 200 new clients in 2023 and this person got only assigned 30? What's going on there? Is there a difference
Mm.
in how they're handling them, on experience, on niche, on something else? Start to ask those questions and you'll see where, oh, these two people, same specialty, same niche, same client type, same whatever, and this person got placed with 45 more clients than this person. Someone's doing something different there. Let's figure out what, why, and how to change it. And then the other last piece is nurture, follow up with, do reactivation campaigns for previous clients. People's issues change. People want to work on additional goals. Some things are one off or resolved and they never want or need to come back. But your old clients, especially for some of you larger group practices where you have 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 plus previous clients who went through therapy, those are going to be some of your best customers. They already worked with you. They probably already had a good experience. They just might need an email or a reminder or an offer or something to be like, hey, why don't you come back in and work on that next phase of life? It's been a couple of years. Maybe they had a kid. Maybe something happened health-wise. Maybe whatever. There's so many reasons why people would start therapy again, and they should start it with you versus another practice. And your marketing and your nurture will kind of dictate that if you insert yourself in the process.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Those are 5 ways. If you systematically work on just one of those and improve it and make it twice as good, any of those can double your business. But if you tackle 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them successfully, appropriately, you could more than 2x your business in the next 24 months. If you want more pragmatic help, suggestions, processes to implement some of these things, shoot us a question in the Facebook group, reach out through our website. We're happy to and help you implement improving your business, especially lead volume in this next year.
Yeah. Best of luck.